Dear guests and colleagues, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on well-being, resilience, and heritage in times of crisis. During the next hour, we will explore this truly interdisciplinary topic with from various variety of perspectives. We will hear experiences from first responders in the field, then through academic reflections on well-being during crises, to practical tools and solutions developed within Resiliage project. So today's sessions bring together communities that do not meet very often. It's disaster risk reduction community, but also heritage and well-being professionals. So we truly hope that this exchange will spark and foster dialogue, inspire collaboration toward building more resilient societies. Now, for the official opening of the webinar, it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Lodovico Forancalavi, Director of UNESCO's Liaison Office to Brussels, to deliver opening remarks. Lodovico, please.
Thank you very much, Irina. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I hope you can hear me well. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this webinar organized by UNESCO and the Resiliage project funded by Horizon Europe of the European Union. There has never been better timing for such an event. Sadly, I would say, as our world faces unprecedented uncertainties and crises from climate change and natural hazards. And I just finished an urgent meeting with our colleagues in the Caribbean to react to the hurricane that is hitting hard the Caribbean in this moment as we speak, to shifting political landscapes, to wars adding one to each other. With over 1 billion people affected by mental health conditions, according to the latest World Health Organization report, promoting well-being for individuals and societies remains more crucial than ever. Together with WHO, UNESCO has been working to achieve, or at least to advance, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal 3, which, as you may recall, calls for healthy lives and well-being for all. Key to this effort is the recognition that culture and heritage play, indeed, a vital role in promoting resilience, as also highlighted in the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, while also supporting mental health and strengthening social cohesion within communities. Earlier this month, convened by UNESCO and hosted by the government of Spain, we had the Mondial Conference, which was held in Barcelona from the 29th of September till the 1st of October, the largest world conference on cultural policy, which reinvigorated our collective efforts to work towards a greater recognition of culture as driver for sustainable development, but also for well-being. This is a conference that brought together an extraordinary breadth of voices and institutions with over 2,500 participants from 163 countries coming together to shape the future of culture in sustainable development.
Survivors from other kinds of abuse.
Sorry, I hear maybe other speakers can mute their mic. Thank you. With 120 ministers and vice ministers, which represent an historic and unprecedented level of political engagement, which also saw the active contributions from around 90 intergovernmental organizations, over 100 NGOs, and representatives from nearly 50 creative and World Heritage cities, and with the academia strongly present, 83 UNESCO chairs and specialized institutes. And the Mondial Conference called for harnessing the potential of tangible and intangible cultural heritage and the interconnectedness between cultural and biological diversity as resources for resilience, for adaptation and mitigation, including for disaster preparedness, post-disaster and post-crisis recovery. During that conference, which I had the privilege of personally attend, there was also an important side event organized by the European Commission and attended by the Commissioner for Intergenerational Fairness, Culture and Education, Commissioner Micallef. And the title of this side event organized by the Commission was on culture and well-being, where the Commission launched its recent report, Culture and Health, Time to Act, which was framed within the EU Work Plan for Culture 2023-2026. This is a report that examines how engagement in culture and creative activities can positively influence physical and mental health, how it can foster social inclusion and contribute to disease prevention and treatment. Additionally, the EU Preparedness Strategy, which was launched early this year in March, also emphasized how empowering citizens to become more resilient with the help of cultural institutions is key. Hence, enhancing the well-being of citizens and creating resilient societies is a responsibility for all. Responsibility for decision makers, but also responsibilities for researchers. And UNESCO is in this regard is supporting our member states, our network of policymakers and researchers, including here in the EU, in these efforts to create evidence-based policies which shall be based on robust data, which is why the objectives of the Resiliage project, which aims exactly at building and fostering community resilience through strategy for societal well-being, resonates particularly with this objective. And the project that convenes us all today not only leverages its expertise, but also strengthens the community resilience through case studies, several which are also UNESCO Global Geoparks. Together with the Politecnico di Torino and other knowledgeable partners presented at today's webinar, we illustrate how to advance knowledge that can later inform evidence-based policies. Through this project, we have witnessed communities and experts coming together to co-create heritage-driven solutions that don't only safeguard our past, but nurture resilience and well-being for the future. And in the faces of crisis, this challenge is to really use every tool at our disposal to nourish and to help communities in being prepared, more resilient and more thriving. So thank you again for joining us today. I really look forward to the discussions ahead and to exploring how together we can shape our heritage to continue being a source of inspiration and resilience and hope in times of crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lodo, for framing the international and EU context. Thank you for mentioning and valuing Resiliage project. That really is an example of impactful project where communities and experts co-create heritage-driven solutions. So I was supposed to pass the floor to Professor Rosa Tamburino, coordinator of Resiliage, but unfortunately, Rosa could not join us today due to health issues. So really wishing Rosa prompt and full recovery. And in her absence, and also to set the stage, I would like to tell a few words about Resiliage project and its conceptual frameworks. So Resiliage stands for Advancing Holistic Understanding of Community Resilience and Heritage Drivers through Community-Based Methodology. Resiliage, it's a Horizon Europe project that is funded under Cluster 3, Disaster Resilient Society, which is much more known by researchers and practitioners working in disaster risk reduction. So in a way, Resiliage is very unique because its goal is to prevent and mitigate effects of disasters and climate-related events by exploring heritage as valuable resource for disaster risk reduction. Resiliage brings together a diverse consortium of 18 partners from 10 European countries. This consortium unites together local authorities, first responders, universities, researchers from one side, as well as citizen groups, small and medium enterprises. So together we create a truly multidisciplinary network capable of linking science, practice, and community knowledge. Conceptually speaking, Resiliage operates within a framework. We call it Systematic Resilience Innovation Framework, or shortly SIRI, which identifies 5 main dimensions for defining and accessing community resilience. So it includes active memory, adaptive governance, social economic resilience, social interaction and inclusiveness, and health and well-being. So SIRI framework constitutes a strategy to innovate community resilience through integration of a variety of interlinked dimensions such as psychological, social, cultural, historical, or environmental factors. Then in practice, to bring these ideas in life, Resiliage works at local level with so-called core labs, community resilience laboratories. So these spaces for community engagement through sustainable heritage workshops, co-creation initiatives, mapping exercises, and experiments to really create the effect of inclusive all society approach. I would leave further details to our next speakers, who will give the floors and who know much better the importance of well-being on the ground. So these are first responders. And our first speaker from the north of Europe, it's Marita Fossen, Managing Director of Trondheim Red Cross, who will give her testimony from Norway. Marita.
Thank you, Irina. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start with saying first, it's an honor to be part of the Resiliage project, which connects research, real-life experience, and community work to make society stronger in times of crisis. And at Trondheim Red Cross, we value this project's broad perspective, understanding that resilience is not just about buildings and emergency plans, but also about people's well-being, strong local connections, and protecting our shared heritage. It focuses on caring for communities, first responders, and vulnerable groups. Through the research, the collaboration, and the practical testing, this project creates useful tools to help communities before, during, and after crisis. I'm the manager of Trondheim Red Cross, and I will have the practitioner's perspective in this presentation. Resilience is not just about buildings and infrastructure or surviving, it's about recovering and thriving. The well-being of people, physical, mental, and social, is keys to how communities cope with and recover from crisis. Supporting first responders and vulnerable groups is essential to make sure no one is left behind. In Trondheim, the Resiliage project studies how health and well-being are affected by sudden events such as landslides and urban fires. Through workshops and simulations, the project involves the community to identify and prevent distress, improve crisis response, and strengthen local resilience. Volunteers play an important role by supporting first responders and helping people directly affected by crisis. Their strong local knowledge and understanding of our culture and natural heritage make them valuable resources in both practical response and community support. And this local insight helps them connect with people, understand the context, and use their heritage as a tool for communication, for trust, and for recovery. And we work closely with local municipalities, the health services, and emergency responders. In practice, this includes joint training, providing mental health support during evacuation, and sharing plans, communication, and mutual respect. As we say, we don't replace public service, we reinforce them. And an effective resilience is built on cooperation and not competition. Well-being is a long-term commitment and not a short-term intervention, and heritage plays an important role in building resilience. It strengthens the community's identity, it offers them emotional support, and it helps people recover more quickly after crisis. Heritage can improve well-being during difficult times and prepare people to better cope if crises happen. In the Resiliage project, Trondheim involves residents in mapping local heritage sites and traditions together, as an example. This co-creational process shows how historical places, open public spaces, and strong community networks can act as sources of strength, helping people feel connected and supported. By including our heritage in the city planning and crisis response, Trondheim not only protects its history, but also helps residents face and recover from challenges more effectively. And this project also develops practical ways to strengthen well-being, these including training programs and community initiatives that help people prepare for and respond to crisis, encouraging both participation and recovery. As an example, in Resiliage, we organized a 2-day workshop that brought together local institutions and officials to discuss and create resilience strategies. Such activities help communities use their common heritage as a resource for building resilience. Volunteers are the heartbeat of our crisis response. Volunteering is a key part of community resilience and play an essential role in crisis response and preparedness. Volunteers are often the first to act and the last to leave. Beyond offering practical help, they also provide emotional support and a sense of safety. Their presence fosters trust, continuity, and care, essential elements of well-being. Our volunteers come from many backgrounds, students, retirees, and professionals, and their local knowledge make our community stronger and more adaptable. And they also support the first responders. In short, Resiliage shows how community resilience involves the whole picture. It includes strong infrastructure, people's well-being, and heritage. Supporting the first responders, involving the community, and valuing heritage are keys to help communities get through tough times and come out stronger. Together, through research, volunteering, collaboration, and care, we can build communities that are not only resilient, but they're also compassionate. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita, for bringing your experience and voice from Red Cross on the importance of well-being for the community, on the work, all the work that you're doing in Resiliage. I just recall to attendees to keep, of course, microphones muted, and that the way to communicate with speakers, it will be by using the chat for questions. Our second speaker comes from the south of Europe. It's Vitor Reis, project manager at Portuguese National Firefighter School. Vitor, yes, waiting for you to present. The floor is yours.
Okay, so good afternoon again to everyone. I'm pleased to present the Resiliage Task 6.3 Training of Trainers, a program that the project partners that are involved in this task are developing, and that is focused on the well-being of first responders. This training course builds directly on the field insights like those that were shared by Trondheim Red Cross, transforming experience from the field into a structured capacity building program for professionals on the front line. In this context, cultural and natural heritage are understood as important resources for recovery and resilience, both for individuals and for the teams working in crisis environment. So, like you know, first responders are regularly exposed to traumatic and high-stress situations. They need not only external support, but also the skills and knowledge to protect their own well-being and to assist colleagues effectively. So the main objectives of this training are to deliver psychological first aid and psychosocial support training. Also promote psychological well-being and personal resilience within operational teams, and recognize heritage as a driver of emotional recovery and community connection after crisis. The program is grounded in a salutogenic approach, focusing on the elements that sustain health and well-being, which are meaning, manageability, and connectedness, the dimensions that cultural heritage naturally reinforces. This training is designed specifically for first responders, firefighters, civil protection, Red Cross, and police. Participants are experienced professionals with the potential to become national trainers. And the phase one will be the pilot implementation in Portugal, starting with the firefighters. And phase two will expand the model to other emergency and responder organizations. We believe that by training trainers, the program ensures that knowledge and practice can be replicated across services and countries, creating a sustainable network of qualified professionals. The program follows an hybrid model combining theory and practice. We will have online modules providing the conceptual foundation of the course, and then we will have face-to-face sessions delivering experiential learning through facilitation exercises, role plays, and simulations in heritage contexts. This balance between theory and practice ensures flexibility, especially for first responders' schedules and practical, replicable outcomes that can be directly applied in professional context. The course uses participatory and experiential learning, specifically designed for first responders, with mini facilitation sessions and learning pairs, applying the SOFA feedback model, fishbowl debriefs for reflective group learning, role plays, and field simulations in cultural and natural heritage sites, communication exercises and stress management practice, and the short light bulb moment reflections. So these methods are informed by Resiliage research on heritage-based practices like storytelling, rituals, and collective memory, which support psychological recovery and cohesion. So by the end of the program, we believe that we will have a pool of qualified trainers able to replicate the training across fire, civil protection, police, and humanitarian services. This will enhance the psychological preparedness among responders, strengthen individual and team well-being, and integrate heritage awareness into emergency response as a source of resilience. So this training bridges field experience and research, linking practical insights with the conceptual framework that our colleagues from Politecnico di Torino will present next. In summary, and I will finish now, the training of trainers empowers first responders to act effectively, support peers, and promote well-being through their connection with cultural and natural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Vitor. Thank you for recalling that heritage could be not only a driver for resilience of community and community members, but that heritage could be a powerful support when coping with well-being of first responders and firefighters. So we're really looking forward to see the final product of training for trainers. Let us move now to the second part of the webinar, where we will explore conceptual aspects of well-being during crisis. And we would now hear from Dr. Odnod, research engineer at the University of Nîmes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to present you, a short conceptual approach of mental health and well-being, and more specifically during crisis and disasters. So, mental health has a complex definition. For a long time, it was defined as the absence of mental disorders, but the definition has been broadened. For example, the World Health Organization defined it as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to contribute to his or her community. However, this definition has certain limitations, notably the fact that it reflects a quite neoliberal view of health, considering mental health problems to be individual issues and therefore requiring individual approaches and treatments. So it means that it excludes the essential roles played by the context, and it encourages individuals to adapt sometimes to noxious environment instead of addressing that harmful and noxious environment. So new definition has been proposed. For example, the community mental health movement defined mental health as the capacity of individuals and groups to organize themselves, to meet their emotional, relational, and material needs, to resist forms of oppression, and to create spaces of safety, solidarity, and meaning. So here we understand that mental health is more a collective process, and the definition emphasizes the importance of social connections, political context, local resources, etc. And this movement also proposes that the definition and also the treatments to mental issues should vary and should be adapted to the culture, by not focusing only on Western approaches with classic individual counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, etc., but also by taking into account the local norms, the local cultures, etc., for example, collective ceremonies, morning rituals, spiritual expressions, etc. So this is precisely one of the strengths of Resiliage project, because this project aims to, in particular, promote resilience through health and well-being of the communities, and takes into account the specific characteristics of the communities and cultures, rather than adopting an individual approach and too much homogeneous definition of it. So mental health and well-being are very similar but distinct concepts. As you can see, there are many types of well-being. They are all more or less interconnected. But if we focus more on psychological well-being, the psychologists distinguish between two dimensions. The hedonic well-being is more linked to search for pleasure, entertainment, and comfort, while the eudaimonic well-being is more linked to self-fulfillment, personal growth, meaning in life, social relationships, etc. Psychological well-being is different of mental health because, for example, it's possible for psychological well-being to persist even when you experience mental suffering. But even if they have an independent part, they're also highly intricated and correlated, because generally when well-being is high, the likelihood of experiencing mental illness decreases, whereas poor mental health diminishes overall well-being. So there are risk and protective factors for mental health and well-being, ranging from individual characteristics to social context, from physical health to lifestyle and living environments. For example, there are some dimensions that we don't exactly think at first. For example, having exercise regularly, having green spaces available close to our living place, etc. So all of these different aspects must be considered holistically to promote well-being and mental health. So as we know, crises and disasters can strongly impact mental health and psychological well-being by provoking negative effects like anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, among other issues. And these impacts can happen whether people are directly or indirectly impacted by the disaster. So this is why, for example, the conceptualizations of PTSD has been broadened, including, for example, practitioners who are exposed to repeated situations and speeches, to people experiencing crisis through their relatives or through media coverage, etc. And this is actually something that we observed in our research project Resiliage. We observed that more than the half of the participants who said experiencing high PTSD symptoms were actually indirect victims, and they experienced the different disaster through most of the time media coverage and relatives. So just to recap briefly a bit more about what is post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, it's often characterized by re-experiencing the trauma and painful recollections,
flashbacks or nightmares. It's also characterized by avoidance of situations that could recall the traumatic event. Also by a diminished responsiveness, like a kind of emotional anesthesia and disinterest in significant activities. And it also can be characterized by a chronic physiological arousal, for example, with exaggerated startle response, disturbed sleep, difficulty in concentrating, etc. So in Resiliage survey, we observed that in general, women experience significantly more symptoms of PTSD than men. So they are more vulnerable to this kind of issue in the context of natural disasters. And we also observed that volunteers in Crete and Karşıyaka in Turkey were particularly prone to PTSD, and even more than first responders. So one of our hypotheses would be that maybe it could be due to different training and preparation, or maybe a different follow-up after a disaster between volunteers and first responders. But in any case, several studies already show that first responders and volunteers are particularly at risk when it comes to mental health and well-being. Most of the time because of the exposure to traumatic events, because of grief, but also because of organizational stressors, for example, staff shortages, shift work, sleep, limited resources, etc. But in any case, crises and disasters can also have positive consequences in terms of mental health and well-being, and particularly when we talk about post-traumatic growth. So in fact, trauma can shake fundamental beliefs about oneself and the world, and it prompts intense connective work that can lead to positive reconstruction. And then it can be, even if it could be accompanied by psychological suffering and by PTSD symptoms. So this is why actually we observe in our surveys that developing post-traumatic growth is also correlated to developing negative symptoms linked to PTSD, because to experience this positive reconstruction, you also have to experience a trauma first. There are many factors that can impact the development of PTSD or post-traumatic growth, such as, for example, repetitive exposition, social support, psychological background, socioeconomic inequalities too. But during our investigation, we also highlighted that PTSD actually can be favored by low trust in institutions, so for example, government or local authorities, whereas post-traumatic growth is promoted by trust in safety institutions and scientists. So this can be explained by the fact that feelings of support from institutions reduce the negative effects of traumatic experiences, and some concrete signs of support can also promote recovery and quality of life after a disaster. So all these elements can once again highlight the important role played by the context and the community in the way that people can deal with this kind of experiences, and the strong impact of community to recover. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Aude, for this very informative overview from recalling definitions toward illustrating with some real statistics coming from the project. Just recalling, of course, the format of the webinar doesn't allow us to go in details with all the results, but these results from the project, Resiliage, are available within different scientific papers and deliverables that are available online. But after this, again, informative overview of well-being, to complete the picture, we would like now to focus on heritage and well-being. And I'm pleased to give the floor to next speaker, Giulia Mesalama, Senior Assistant Professor of History of Architecture from Politecnico di Torino. Giulia.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Irina. Good afternoon, everyone. As Irina mentioned, I'm part of the research group from Politecnico of Torino coordinating the Resiliage project, and this research group particularly focus on the role of cultural natural heritage for community resilience. But before going into the findings of the Resiliage project, I think could be useful to take a brief step back to outline the conceptual framework that connects heritage and well-being and the approach that guided our analysis. As already mentioned, in recent years, the relationship between heritage and well-being has become an emerging field of research. We can say that there's been a sort of turning point in 2019 when the WHO, the World Health Organization, published a scoping review on the role of arts and health and the role of arts and culture for health. And these studies gather evidence from over 3,000 articles, experience, and confirm that cultural and artistic participation and engagement can significantly contribute to physical and mental health. Although that report didn't specifically at that stage mention the framework of heritage within the culture, in a way it opened the way for a new reflection and investigation on the so-called cultural determinants of health. And so since then, several European frameworks have recognized the potentials of heritage for psychological and social well-being. Of course, assuming the paradigm from the FARE Convention of Heritage, and next publish new documents within for example, the European Framework for Action on Cultural Heritage, and also the results of the project, European project Culture for Health, and report that had been published a few years ago. These documents, in a way, collectively show that cultural heritage is not just a resource for sustainable development, but also a so-called health determinants. Yes, this is just quotations from the European framework. So to understand this relationship and also to clarify the approach we adopt within Resiliage, we can refer in a way to the salutogenic model that was conceived in 1970s, and that in a way from the Aaron Antonovsky, and that focused on what causes disease, not more on pathogenesis approach, but on salutogenic approach. So asking what creates and sustains health. So this shift is fundamental to consider culture and heritage as a health determinant. And according to that, heritage contribute to this process. So in enhancing the well-being and health of individual and communities by nurturing meaningfulness, so connecting people with shared history, values, and emotion, the comprehensibility, offering coherent narrative in times of uncertainty, and manageability, providing familiar symbols, rituals, community practices that foster control and resilience. According to that, we can say that, and according to this salutogenic approach, we consider heritage as a salutogenic resource. Heritage is a driver for well-being and what is the slide, please? So now we can move to the findings from the Resiliage, so from the framework to the field. And according with that, we work with a salutogenic perspective to explore more specifically the well-being dimension. We look at how local heritage can act as a driver of well-being in crisis and also in post-disaster context. And this work, we can say, was carried out by two complementary lines of research. On a way, a sort of scoping review of social behavioral factors in crisis and disaster, and as a second action, a set of diverse collaborative on-site activities developed with the core lab, the Community Resilience Core Lab. So on-site activity aiming at identifying local heritage drivers. These two different strands produce concrete outputs, let's say. On one hand, lessons learned inventory from the scoping review, and on the other hand, also lessons learned and also from local perspective and heritage drivers. So in the next slide, we will see some of the findings from this first action, the scoping review. The role of local indigenous knowledge that, according with the literature, plays a central role in maintaining identity and belonging. Communities that rely on traditional or ancestral knowledge are better equipped to recover emotionally and socially after disaster. Another aspect is heritage, memory, and healing. So commemoration, rituals, and also the process, a collective process of heritagization of disaster fostered collective remembrance and psychological recovery. The role of spiritual and symbolic heritage, so faith-based and ritual practices that contribute to emotional stability, and also cultural narratives and storytelling that provide frameworks to understand trauma and transform loss into shared meaning. And finally, also the role of the institution, the cultural institution, museum and cultural space themselves became safe environments for dialogue and for psychological support. So in a way, from this literature review, the evidence showed that heritage can act both at the symbolic, I mean more on the intangible, but also the intangible aspect of heritage can support well-being and health. And in the next slide, we can see just a sort of synthesis of this learned from the literature. So just the idea of using cultural narratives to understand trauma, the role, as I mentioned, of spiritual, tangible, intangible heritage, and also the use of memorials to collectively remember crises for psychological recovery. In the next slides, we move from the results we achieved from the activities we conduct with the core lab. And in these findings, the findings we obtained from the literature review in a way informed the design of our on-site collaborative workshop within the core lab. In Famenne-Ardenne in Belgium, we realized that thanks to the cooperation with the community, the local flood has become part of the collective memory, and commemoration and oral storytelling helped communities process trauma and restore emotional balance. In this community core lab, we realized that heritage clearly functions as a sort of shared process of remembrance and the emotional healing. In Naturteja, the next one, a geopark in Portugal, we investigate with the participants as well the role of natural and geological heritage and in calming in a way and to be restorative for the psychological well-being, but also the role of traditional knowledge and craft and collective outdoor practices creating positive emotions and also a sense of pride and renew energy. In the next core lab in Trondheim, we explored the role of historic buildings and landscape, acting as, let's say, emotional anchors, with involvement also on the elderly in heritage activity, reinforcing intergenerational connection and self-esteem. In Crete, we explore and we the role of rituals and the storytelling, but also the role of music, commemoration, and the sacred sites that provide space of emotional release and reflection. And as I mentioned, the museum and cultural centers in themselves as perceived as safe environment from the community. And I guess the last one, Karşıyaka in Turkey, we focus on the spiritual intangible heritage, also the role of women's active role in heritage transmission for psychological resilience and also for the mutual care. And it is not over, let's say. We are in these weeks doing our third campaign in a different core lab. So we are still working on this, and the final aim of this activity is to try to understand also with the communities which are the local heritage drivers. So we are keeping on searching and experimenting with the community, the role of heritage for well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, for this concise overview from theory to practice on how heritage is being really a driver of resilience in different parts of Europe. And I'm looking at the clock, and I would like to anticipate that we might not have time for a Q&A dedicated session. While having this lineup of rich technical expertise, we decided to privilege the time for interventions. But you, of course, attendees, I see you're being active in Q&A in the chat. So the remaining time, you may wish to further ask questions in the chat. In our third part, we would like to showcase some tools that are related to well-being and resilience. And for the presentation on methodologies for enhancing well-being through training, I would like to give the floor to our last but not least speaker, Veronika Takas from Deep Blue.
Thank you very much, Irina. Greetings, everyone. So just as a last presenter for today, I'm here to present a citizen's perspective in building well-being and mental health in the times of disaster. And let's start this presentation by enhancing or emphasizing once again the importance of mental health and well-being, because nearly all people that is affected or experience some kind of emergencies, including natural disaster, are actually likely to experience some form of psychological distress, including anxiety, sadness, sleep issues, or fatigue. And important to say is that this often improves over time, but a significant minority develops long-term conditions, for example, depression and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. The percentages that you can see in brackets after the expressions actually represents the percentage of the population developing these. And while you can see that these are quite wide in terms of the broadness that they cover, this percentage actually largely depends on the characteristics of the natural disaster itself, and also the social demographic characteristics of the population affected by the natural disasters. When in the first year of the project, we conducted these field activities already mentioned during the call. We tried to understand the gaps and needs, the challenges that these five populations in the five core labs are facing. And we understood that the contributing factors to a higher level of stress within these communities can be roughly divided into four major, let's say, type of contributing factors. The first one, as we call it, the loss of control and hopelessness, as this is one of the most important experience one can ever have who undergoes some kind of emergency event, and also including natural disasters, because these people are likely losing loved ones during the disaster. They're likely lose their job, income. They're likely lose their home, or at least they are displaced to some temporary housing. And of course, this naturally disrupts the already existing social network somehow, if we are considering an isolating experience coming with natural disasters. So all in all, this actually largely affects someone's self-efficacy. The second factor is related to, as already emphasized by Odd Nods in her presentation, how someone perceives the actions of coming from the government. Because if there are some systemic failures in the aid, if it is perceived or considered insufficient, or there is some poorly executed humanitarian responses, lack of information on basic services, or there are some overcrowded conditions, then citizens are more likely to perceive the government as an institute betraying them, and they many times actually reported that they feel that they are left on their own, they are left alone to beat and to manage this situation. The third contributing factor is related to the scarcity of psychological support. Obviously, the majority of support coming in the times of disaster, especially in the short and midterm in the recovery phase, are focused largely on the logistics, financial, and of course health, physical health aspects of disaster risk management, and there's a limited access to mental health support, often along with a lack of tailored and, most importantly, sustainable mental health services available to citizens. The fourth and also very important ones are related to the stigma that are surrounding, let's say, the psychological support. And as I said, while the focus is often on the physical needs, the psychological distress is often considered as a sign of weakness. So all of these four factors and the related challenges and gaps that we understood in the first year of the project led us to the conclusion that in the Resiliage training package, we must dedicate a quite significant parts to the mental health and well-being of citizens by first of all developing a bunch of training modules that support citizens in regaining or let's say maintaining their control as much as it is possible in the time of a disaster, and also by developing some training modules in which we provide actual techniques to the citizens that they can implement in their daily life, as they are called stress management techniques. Most importantly, these techniques should not require the necessary presence of a mental health conditioner. So the Resiliage training package is actually focusing on these two aspects, so empowering citizens, but also providing them with these techniques to reduce stress management. And this actually very much in line with the psychology and the approach of psychology on how someone can cope with stress or some kind of a major life event. The first one is called problem-focused coping mechanisms. And again, the focus here is to either stay in control over the situation or actively regaining it as soon and as much as possible in the recovery phase of the disaster risk management cycle. The second one is called emotion-focused coping mechanisms. And in this, let's say, approach, the focus is on the cognitive and behavioral efforts that aim to reduce, regulate, and in general manage the negative emotional responses. This is actually an essential aspect in disasters because they are fundamentally uncontrollable, and there are some important vulnerable groups that are by nature in possession of a lot less control than the majority of the population. So also for thinking about them, focusing also on the emotional aspects of how to bear such a trauma is essential for Resiliage. So now let's have a look at the training modules that we developed for problem-focused scoping. I give you only one example here for the shortness of time, and I would like to focus on the risk awareness training module developed by Resiliage within the project. And in this, we're actually, as I said, providing essential information on what to do in case before, during, and after a disaster. And by doing so, we're really trying to foster citizens to keep in control as much as possible or to regain it. So we are sharing educational materials on to increase one's awareness of the risk. So, for example, what are the risk-prone areas within a city or within an area? By doing so, we also try to foster reliable media consumption, emphasizing the importance of consuming multiple sources of information and to really highlight the pros and cons of different channels during the disasters. Also, we try to teach the immediate actions to do. Just try to think of the drop, cover, hold on, a basic rule during earthquake. This is something that we're really trying to emphasize within all the 5 core labs and all the natural disaster and hazard types that we are focusing on within the project. We also try to teach how to secure a home when it comes to an emergency event, for example, to turn off the power for the entire home when it comes to an event of a flood. Also, we are trying to teach what to store at home, focusing on the different type of natural hazards. So focusing, for example, on floods, to have bottled water and water purification tablets. These are really only examples, but we're really covering all the aspects of all the natural hazards the project is focusing on. We also help citizens creating a checklist for evacuation, what to take them with them when it comes to an evacuation event. Also fostering them to create a family emergency plan. So, for example, where to meet, which assembly point to use for gathering with family members after the event. And also, very importantly, focusing also on the community aspects of resilience. We foster citizens to actively discover the available resources within the community, so to stay prepared, stay more informed, and thus keep as much as control as possible in this situation. The second aspect, though, as I already highlighted, is related to emotional coping with it, with the stress caused by disasters. And for this, we are developing a module that is called psychological self-care. And once again, the most important aspect here is to provide citizens with concrete tools that can be used anytime without the necessary presence of a mental health professional. For this, the major approach here was to provide a variety of techniques, including 4 different types, and to basically ensure that whoever would like to use this will surely find one relatable technique that is implementable in their everyday life. Therefore, we decided to build in simpler ones and also more complex ones for the different type of citizens to basically practice. The first one, and probably the easiest or simplest technique, is a breathing technique that is called 4-7-8, in which someone is actually inhaling for 4 seconds, keeps it for 7, and then exhaling for another 8 seconds. This is, first of all, simple and also has an immediate effect on the body. So this is an instant mechanisms for panic or fear or overwhelm, and most importantly, easy to deliver. It doesn't require any specific time, or doesn't require any specific location to deliver. The second one we choose for this purpose is a visualization technique that is called guided imagery, and for that we're using an example of walking in the nature. Here we actually use the power of imagination and attention to reduce stress by creating an imagery scenario, and we walk through the participants in this imaginary scenario by fostering them to use their eyes, their how they smell or what they hear, and these are of course all imaginary, let's say, aspects, but through this mind-body connection that is proved to be there, we actually think that by reducing and slowing down the mind, the body will eventually respond, and it slows down as well. So thus preventing longer run physical symptoms. The third one is called mindfulness, and here we try to basically anchor the citizens' minds into the here and there, here and now, and also to basically prevent mind wandering by really trying to direct their attention to the present moment. And the 5 senses exercise is also a very easily implementable one, by which we ask participants to just really sit down, look around, and notice 5 things that they can actually see around themselves, 4 things that they can feel. So, for example, tactic kind of information, 3 things that they can hear, 2 things that they can smell, and 1 thing that they can taste. This can be a very important part to really stop these overwhelming feelings and really to anchor someone's attention to the present moment. The fourth one is the longest run solution or tool that we are using, is the gratitude journal, rooted in positive psychology. This is really to shift one's focus from the negative or stressful thoughts to the positive aspects of one's day. So just imagine that you are in a situation that you're a survivor of a natural disaster. oftentimes the situation around you is not something that you can change, but you can always change the way you look at your everyday life by really practicing, for example, this gratitude journal, which is a task during which for 1 week you start taking notes about the positive aspects that are happening to you in your everyday life. For example, a good thing that happened to me today, or someone I was thankful for today, or today I smiled when this and this happened. So we're really trying to focus the attention on the positive aspects of one's life in an uncontrollable situation. The techniques that I presented here are actually, they proved to be very effective in calming down the nervous system, activating parasympathetic nervous systems. They also reduce cardiovascular activity, for example, the heart rate and blood pressure. They distract the brain from physical pain. They reduce cortisol level, which is the stress hormone of the body, and also they improve sleeping quality. From the psychological point of view, they foster a sense of hope and optimism. They increase resilience, strengthen and the social bonds, and also they increase one's self-awareness, which is also a very important aspect. 3 challenges that we found on the way when developing and implementing these tools or techniques. The first one is practice makes perfect. So these techniques require a bit of practice to be effective. So it is very important from our side to communicate that if something there is not an immediate effect at the first trial, it is still very worth to keep this practice in their everyday life of the citizens, just to really experience this advantageous effects later on. The timing of the training is a second challenge because we would like to basically implement these trainings in the preparation phase to be used in the recovery phase. And this requires a very, let's say, conscious risk awareness activity from our end to really raise the importance of these activities, these solutions, and to foster their implementation. The third one is, and probably the most important, is that in order that these techniques are implemented in the society, we need to find the reliable channels or actors that are willing to spread the information and promote this kind of techniques. And interestingly enough, for example, in Turkey, there will be general practitioners that we will ask to promote it. But in Crete, it will be most likely the religious leader of the community who will collaborate with us in really spreading the information about the importance of emotional focused coping mechanisms and activities. So that is all from my end, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronica. It feels it was good to conclude with this presentation on practical solutions. Thank you very much. Well, we are heading toward the end of the webinar. Of course, during this hour, we could not cover it all because the topic also is very truly large and also pretty new. Well, actually, I'm pleased that this moment brought together both disaster risk reduction, resilience, community and heritage, and culture communities. And actually, I see with pleasure the discussions and some comments in the chat. Some of them are related to there are no natural disasters, it's natural hazards. Of course, this mantra, and myself being a disaster risk reduction person, so I know this mantra, but maybe it is less known to culture and the well-being specialists. So again, this recalls that it's a sign that this topic is really, that we're dealing today, it's really truly intersectorial, and that hoping that this webinar was a moment of exchanges and insights from researchers, from practitioners, but also from different communities, so heritage, culture, but also disaster risk reduction and well-being communities, and that it will give some food for thought and maybe some future cooperations. So with that, I will close today's webinar. Thank you very much to all speakers, to attendees. The webinar will be recorded and available on YouTube of Resiliage project. So thank you all, and wishing a productive week full of well-being, positive practices. Thank you very much.